Welcome everybody to LCOY 2021. I'm so excited, and this year's topic is Restoring the Climate. I am the solution. I am Ali.
Hi, and I'm Lauren.
And together we are the solution. And that includes all of y'all and also our distinguished speakers, which we have many of them. And we are part of the Brahma Kumaris who have the honor to host this year's event.
So the Brahma Kumaris Australia is an organisation that teaches meditation and positive thinking. Let's begin with the Welcome to Country.
Yes, so just to let you know, the Welcome to Country is keeping with tradition here in Australia, and in which we give tribute and also give an acknowledgement to the original custodians of this land, which are the Aboriginals. And in order to do this, we have the pleasure to have an elder who will do the Welcome to Country for this event, and that is Auntie Carol. So passing it over to you, Auntie Carol.
So I would say Warami and Yaranji. Warami and Yaranji because we have two groups where I come from. And it's sort of, I'd like to pay respects to our elders past, those that are present, but as always, and with a lot of love and hope for our future generations. And also at this time, I'd like to cut into what I usually say and say thank you very much for what you are doing to save our country and to give the youths something to seek and something to think about. Because unless we have them on board, Australia will not be Australia for much longer. So thank you very much for what you are doing. And I would also like to add, we are doing our bit up here through the schools. The schools have an area that they have to go and clean up. They don't have to go and do it. It's only the people that want to go and do it, which is most of the school. So we have St. Kenneth's, they go to the Three Sisters. We have people in every school, in every town that has a favourite place where they go and they clean up. They take it all back, they weigh it, and then they say to the council, this is unacceptable. So with what you guys are doing, it's making us feel like we are adding a little bit of our weight to that. Not as much as you guys, because you get around a lot more. But yeah, we really do appreciate everything that you're doing. And I must say, being with Brahma Kumaris up here in Lura, I love it. It's beautiful. It's like my culture all over again, only it's much wider and many more people that can say and do the right things to help. I'm going to try and bring the kids here this year just so as they can see what does happen when somebody has got an idea and they put it into practice. So what I have to do is say once again, thank you very much for what you are doing, and thank you for picking the Blue Mountains this time. So please enjoy it all. And as I said, we're here. If ever you need us, you can just get in touch with us. And we do appreciate what you've done. Thank you very much. Enjoy your session.
Thank you so much, Auntie Carol. It was a pleasure having you here. So, for those who aren't familiar with what an LCOY is, would like to, in the next part, would like to discuss that and just run through that so that you're all aware. Is Heeta, can I get you to put on your video here? Hi, Heeta. So I'd like to welcome Heeta Lakhani. Hi, Heeta. So Heeta joins us from Mumbai, India.
Hello.
She's the global focal point for YOUNGO. Hello. So she's the global focal point for YOUNGO, the official youth constituency for UNFCCC. And she's been active both locally and internationally as a climate change educator. So Heeta, it's a pleasure to have you here. Would you be able to explain a little bit more to us about LCOY?
Sure, thank you so much, Lauren. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And let me begin by first congratulating what an effort you've taken to make this happen, the entire team. We're very, very happy as YOUNGO, which is the youth constituency. We're very happy to see these local conferences happening across the world, to see young people bringing out change in their own countries, in their own regions. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here. So to give a little bit of background of to what Lauren said, YOUNGO, which is short for Youth NGOs, is the official youth constituency of the UNFCCC. But now what does that mean? So within the UN climate change system, you can only sort of make a difference to the negotiation process if you're part of a country delegation. And most of us as young people were not part of official delegations for our country. But to sort of overcome this block, civil society in general, so the entire civil society is broadly categorized into 9 different categories. So there, of course, one of them is for youth, which is YOUNGO, and there are 8 other categories. There's one for indigenous peoples, there's one for gender, there's one for farmers, there's one for research institutes, there's one for environmental organizations, one for local governments, and one for businesses. So out of these 9, one of them is youth, which is called YOUNGO, which is why the name Youth Non-Governmental Organizations. And this is the official mode for young people for young people across the world to be part of the UNFCCC negotiation process. So any young person who wants to be part of the youth voice has to be through YOUNGO, which is what makes us very, very special. We're a global network of young people from across the world. We've redone our membership, so I can very proudly say we truly are global. We have young people from across the world, from all regions, who are part of YOUNGO currently, and it's growing by the day. We have different working groups that these youth engage under. So, which means that we have working groups, some of them very thematic based on the UNFCCC, like, for example, negotiation topics like adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage, action for climate empowerment, etc. But we also have quite a few cross-cutting themes where young people are interested, like it could be, say, for example, gender or human rights, or a cities working group, or a working group on science. There's someone who recently wrote an email saying, I want to start a working group on the Arctic. So any space where young people are interested in working, in learning, it's an open space. And we are a completely volunteer-run network. So there's no hierarchy, there's no sort of payment that anyone needs to make to join. There's no membership fee. We only have a sign-up form that you fill in to become a member. So anyone under the age of 35 is free to be a member. We don't have a lower age, but we do have an upper sort of cutoff mark. And within YOUNGO, we have our annual conference, which is known as the Conference of Youth, or the COY in short. And this COY generally takes place every year in the country where the COP will be. So COP26 this year is going to be in Glasgow. So COY 16 is planned a few days before COP26 in Glasgow. And COY is a space where young people come, they meet. Of course, it's networking, it's learning, it's sessions, workshops, all kinds of things. But the outcome, the main aim of a COY is to have young people's voices put into a sort of outcome or a policy document, which is then given to the COP president, basically the main person who's sort of the president for that year's Conference of Parties, and the UNFCCC Secretariat. And this is more or less in line with what is going to be negotiated at that year's conference, because that's the only space where you can clearly make suggestions to, or see that we would like to see progress in, for example, currently we're stuck, again, technical terms, so don't get worried into what I'm saying, but we would like to see progress on finance or progress on Article 6, and all of these have different implications. You don't need to know it, but a COP is a space where young people learn, they get together and do, a COY is a space where young people learn and they get together and do all of this. But of course, this is very, very limiting, because how many young people can actually be in Glasgow for the COY? And this year is exceptionally special with the health pandemic, that it really, really reduces the capacity of youth to fly. And again, it's not climate friendly to have everyone flying for a 3 or 4 day conference when we're trying to bring down carbon emissions. So which is why we've had over the years something known as local COYs, which we have currently going on, or regional COYs. So basically something that will take place in the lead up to COY. And of course, since we've had this gap year, we will have another set of COYs, hopefully, in the latter part of 2021. So the outcomes of all of these together will feed into the global COY. And this goes as a combined outcome document to COP26. And in addition, this year, we're also going to have a virtual COY. So a global COY, but virtual, a few weeks before the global COY, because again, same story, not everyone can be at the COY. So how do we have these local versions where you have local solutions, discussions, because in a global COY, of course, it's a very different sort of dynamic, but you can focus on local action, which is what we need. We need bottom-up action. And this can only happen through a local COY. So this is where the local COY feeds into, most likely this time, depending on how the teams work, but most likely into a virtual COY. And that consolidated feeds into the global COY. So long story short, this is basically young people across the world, whether or not you're part of YOUNGO, this is your chance. Go tell your friends, tell your siblings, tell your colleagues. This is the 3 days that you have to make your voice heard into the international processes. Everything that is discussed here will be heard, or at least we hope will be heard by the negotiators, will definitely be heard by other young people from the world. So this is the chance you have to, brainstorm, to think about what you want to do, and ensure that as the youth of Australia, come up with something very solid and very inspiring, if I can say. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Heeta, and I feel inspired too. And on that note, registrations are still open. So if you do know other people who would be interested in this, it's not too late to let them know. So thank you, Heeta. Now, Ali, what are you wearing?
Oh, I had a change of clothes like the climate, and well, we need to keep changing. And I went in for a mango, which is basically the tropical fruit here in Darwin. So it is very local, and it is what we have here. What's your favorite fruit, Lauren?
Bananas.
Bananas. See, now that sounds like Ananya, who is one of our chief hosts for this conference. There we go. So it's A-N-A-N, and there's a Y somewhere. There we go, Ananya. And she's been very much in the forefront of putting all of this together. So let's see if we can get a wave from Ananya. Can
this is
we
a
get
surprise
a hi?
for Ananya.
Yeah. And that's a hi from Ananya.
Hello.
Thank you so much. And we'll also have the tech team who's done a brilliant job in the background. And if we can get a hi from the tech team. Where we have one, yes, very good.
So everyone, the planning team, moderators, and the tech team, they've all been working. Oh yes, yeah, everyone wait. So everyone's been working tirelessly to work for this. So we wanted to just, before we start, we wanted to say thank you to everyone. All right, so now for the fun part, a few housekeeping notes. Firstly is just to set out a code for each other, to treat each other with respect throughout this weekend. Understanding we all come from different backgrounds, so we'll likely have different views on certain things. Secondly, Heeta touched on this, that the input from this weekend will feed into an outcomes report, which will be presented to the Conference of Youth at the global platform, and that's organised by UNFCCC. So just like Heeta was saying, this is an opportunity for you to contribute. You'll also see an email from us this morning, and in there, there's a link towards the bottom with a form. And at the end of each day, we're inviting you to put your thoughts from the day down in writing if you really would like to. Definitely make sure that your input goes towards that report. Also, after this weekend, we'll send you a participation certificate, but just to help us with your contact details, if you could make sure you complete that form so that we can send that out to you. And lastly, just a few Zoom housekeeping points. I'll keep them brief. When we're interacting with each other, so if you're asking questions or if we're in a breakout room having discussions with each other, please keep your cameras on, just so that it's more like a real connection, just because it's online. But otherwise, please keep muted if you're not speaking. There is a chat box function down, I think it would be this side of your screen. If you all want to just click on that, the chat box, and write a few comments now, maybe write where you're from, and we'll use this over the weekend to, you know, just share thoughts. And as the speakers are speaking, you can put your thoughts there, you know, what's jumping out at you, please feel free to share. So I'll ask everyone if you can say hi, say where you're from, your name, get to know you all. So moving forwards, over this weekend, I'm really excited to hear from some great speakers and also from you. So we'll have panels, interviews, group discussions in breakout rooms. Tonight, we'll have one panel just to warm up, and then a few words from Charlie Hogg from the Brahma Kumaris Australia. So on that note, let's move into our first panel. First, I'll just have a look at this. We've got people from Melbourne, from Sydney, from the Philippines, even Pakistan. Wow, Blue Mountains, Darwin, Wellington. This is awesome. So good to meet you all. So we'll get started into our first panel, which is exploring solutions for restoration. And this is basically to explore the theme for this conference with a range of panelists from some pretty diverse backgrounds. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Emma O'Neill. Hi, Emma. Hello. So Emma is a climate change and water expert working on, Emma is an environmental planner working to adapt the Southeast Queensland water supply to the impacts of climate change. So she's worked in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and even the Pacific island of Kiribati. Which is, I find that particularly interesting because I know they're one of the countries that are already being impacted by climate change. So hoping that we can hear about that, Emma. So Emma is passionate about driving meaningful and sustainable change within organizations and has a strong interest in climate change communication techniques. And just as a fun fact to throw in, Emma has not got any pets, but a rapidly growing collection of houseplants, which I totally resonate with. So Emma, great to have you here. Next, I'll invite Sonja Ohlsson. Sonja, good to have you here. So Sonja joins us all the way from Denmark. She's the founder and coordinator of Brahma Kumaris Environmental Initiative, which was developed to create a higher environmental awareness within the Brahma Kumaris, the host here today. And at an inner dimension to discussions at the UN Climate Change and Biodiversity Conference. As a fun fact, Sonja grew up on a farm in Sweden as a child, but now she lives in Denmark, where it's -7 degrees, was it today? Yeah. I think, yeah. So for us in Australia, it's hard to imagine. And lastly, I'd like to invite back Heeta, if we could see Heeta. Hi again, Heeta, welcome back. So as well as her role with YOUNGO, Heeta is involved in a range of fascinating work. Currently, she's a director of youth partnerships at March for Science and is an advocate for sustainable food as part of the Youth Ambassador Council at Real Food Systems. She's a believer in the participation power of youth and aims to create change makers on knowledge-based action. So great to have you all here. Without further ado, we'll get into the questions. So tonight, we're going to be exploring the topic of this broader conference. But firstly, I want to hear from you all. What was the moment when you realized you had to stand up and do something for climate change? So tell us that moment, what really led up to it. And maybe Emma, if I could ask you to go first. Put you on the spot.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's really an honour and a privilege to be part of this event. So Thank you, and welcome to the panelists I'm sharing this time with. So for me, I guess I studied environmental management in the early 2000s. And so from there, I sort of knew that at a theoretical level that climate change was something that was happening. And so I had this understanding of that, but always sort of thought about it as a future problem that, you know, there was time to think about dealing with it. Then in 2016, I took up an opportunity to live and work in the Pacific island country of Kiribati, which, as you said, Lauren, it's a very low-lying atoll country, and rising sea levels there are already causing coastal erosion, some occasional flooding and inundation of communities, and saline intrusion into groundwater. And it's described as being on the front line of climate change. And it's one of the first places likely to have climate change refugees. And I just absolutely fell in love with the place when I was there, and the people and the culture. And so it really hit home to me and made me far more aware of the realities of climate change and what it meant for people who were living in that situation where they were highly vulnerable. So with that in mind, I had the opportunity to come back to Australia, where I took up the role working with the water supply to adapt to climate change. And throughout this, I became really aware of the costs of cost to infrastructure and the cost to our cities of adapting to climate change. And I also became increasingly exposed to the climate change science and the observations. And what really struck me is that we've started to see trends already happening. So they're happening, it's not only in the vulnerable Pacific Island countries, but already in Australia and Brisbane, we've seen clear trends of warming temperatures, increasingly dry conditions that show that climate change is not a future problem we need to deal with, it's happening now, and we need to do something about it now.
Thanks so much, Emma. And next, if I could perhaps ask Sonja, would you be able to share? What was your story?
Yeah, hello everyone. And it's so nice to be in a panel with three young women. And so greetings from down under in Denmark. And as Lauren said, it's minus 7 degrees here today. And as Lauren said, I was grown up on the farm. So I've kind of lived in nature as a kid. And I started meditation when I was 24. And I never thought of the connection between meditation and spirituality and sustainability at all. I didn't even know it was so beneficial for nature to be vegetarian. But then in 2015, 2009, COP15 came to Copenhagen. Some of you might remember the result of COP15 wasn't very good. They wanted to renew the Kyoto Protocol. So we heard about it in the news here in Copenhagen, maybe a year, 1.5 years beforehand. And I was sitting having a chit chat with my friend in a cafe and talking about, okay, here in Copenhagen, we should do something for the environment because Obama is coming to Copenhagen and the whole world will be here, so we should also be here. But then I realized we can't just sort of mobilize Brahma Kumaris in order to participate in a conference. We have to do something in-house also to make the environmental awareness bigger in our own faith community. So we started 2 big movements, and it's been a great journey since. But I think my aha moment came when I realized one day that my thoughts actually, in the long run, impact climate change. And maybe we'll talk about it later, but somehow what I'm thinking will lead to my actions, which will finally lead to the world around us as we see it today. And that was a big wake up that my thought matters. And I love the introduction video we have here with all the animals. And I think all of us might become soft in our hearts, isn't it, when we see the animals? And can you imagine that my thoughts will actually hurt the animals in the end? So that was a big wake-up moment for me. And there is an old Native American saying that if there were no animals on the planet, the human beings would feel very lonely. And I think that's right. So that was my aha moment. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And maybe I'll even ask everyone else on the line, as you're listening to these, if you have a aha story that you'd like to share, please feel free to share it in the chat box as well. And Heeta, can we hear your story as well, if you'd like to go next?
Sure, thank you so much. And I think it's so great to hear stories both from Sonja and Emma to see how different people, you know, in very different parts of the world, but motivated, working for the same cause. And I think it's very inspiring for me. I don't know if I have one aha moment, but I do have something that from my childhood that sort of changed or maybe shaped the way I started thinking. So I must be around 12 or 13 walking back home from school one afternoon. And I live in the city of Mumbai, which is a coastal city. And in the south where I live, we have something known as Marine Drive with the Queen's Necklace, which is of course one of the most, most prime area. Everyone wants to go there. Also, it's really pretty. You can get the sea breeze, you can watch the city lights and, you know, just have a nice time doing nothing there. So as I was walking by that street, we were having a big sort of restoration, not restoration, but a beautification project for Marine Drive. So they were basically making the walkway a little broader so that people can exercise, they can walk, cycle, etc. And the entire road, as a child, when I remember it, we had huge, long, tall coconut palm trees lined for about a few kilometers, you know, long. And for this project, they had to take out those coconut trees. So they weren't chopping them down. They were saying they were going to transplant them somewhere. I'm not sure what happened or if they ever got transplanted. I was too young to understand and follow up on those things. But I was walking back home when this transplantation part was going on. And there was this huge trailer which had an equally long coconut palm tree, which had probably just been taken off. And I could see it, you know, with its roots out and with the entire glory of its leaves, those huge palm leaves, just lying on that trailer. And that literally shook me. I could not understand how people can beautify something by taking out the natural beauty out of that space. It just didn't make sense to me as a 12 or 13-year-old girl. It made absolute no sense. I'm saying, you're taking away the trees and you call it a beautification project. How is this beautiful? You're adding concrete to it and saying this is going to beautify the space. And I think I really didn't know what to do. I went home. I was in tears almost because something within me didn't seem right to me. And I didn't know what to do. It was very helpless. And that's where it passed. I never did anything about it. I didn't have the guidance. I didn't have the knowledge. But this kept me going, as I've always liked nature. I've always liked animals, you know, being out in the open, looking after an injured stray maybe. So these things were there, but I think this was something that made me think a little more. And I think since the time I was a child and I learned the term environmentalist, and I think it was just a little after this sort of period, I decided that this is what I want to be when I grow up. But of course, as children, you know, we want to be a lot of different things, and we really don't, like, it changes as you grow up. So I did have like flickering moments when I was deciding what degree I wanted to do, etc. But after I finished my bachelor's degree, I knew environment is what I wanted to be, what I wanted to do and be in, and that's how I chose a master's in the field. But so yeah, it's a series of things as a child, but I think this is one story that explicitly I can't forget even until today.
Well, I'm glad you stuck with it and that you're here with us today, sticking with that role and being a voice for the world. So thank you. And so I think now we'll get into the theme of the conference, which is restoring the climate. And this was inspired from the UN's Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. So I thought, okay, let's break this down in how it means in terms of climate change. So Heeta, I'm wondering if you can continue speaking now, what your thoughts are. How does restoration play into the world of climate change solutions?
Yeah, I think I think this is it's interconnected. So we can't talk about ecosystem restoration without thinking about the environment, without thinking about the climate, and the interconnectedness of the entire system makes it special in that sense. Because of course, our natural world, our biodiversity, our environment, our waters, rivers, lakes, forests, wetlands, whatever you call it, plays a massive role in regulation of the climate. And what we are doing by adding more and more carbon into the atmosphere is affecting all of these systems by cutting down trees, by polluting our rivers, by taking away wetlands, polluting the oceans. All of this, it's all a part of the whole system. So we can't really have conversations in silos and say, you know, I look after one bit, you look after the other, because that doesn't work. So definitely, I think when we talk about climate change and when we talk about restoring the climate, we're basically talking about how do we, number one, of course, not make it worse. And number two, probably try and bring back as much carbon as we can. Because even as of today, if we stopped adding any more carbon into the atmosphere, we're at a stage where it is going to continue warming for a few years. So we definitely need to bring back the carbon. And the simplest, most easiest, most effective way is to keep our natural systems intact, to restore our natural systems. And they will do the job for us free of cost. So definitely there is a huge interlinkage, and a huge major chunk of it depends on restoration, on how we do it, how quickly and how well we do it. So yeah, that's what I feel.
No, thank you. That's definitely true, how everything's interlinked. And talking of things interlinking, Sonja, I was wondering if you could speak next about how something like spirituality and mindfulness can connect to nature, and what does that mean to you in terms of restoration and climate change?
Yeah, restoration is a beautiful concept, actually. And if you look into what the word restoration means, one way of interpreting it would be to bring back something we used to have in the past. So I restore something, I bring something back in order to help us for the future and for any future difficulties or problem that may lay ahead. So in a sense, I'm quite happy to be the older generation sitting here with you today, because I have a few things in my baggage I like to bring back to you. And, you know, when I was a kid, things didn't happen so fast. So in a sense, if we all slow down a bit, we would help restoring our life. And we've seen this in the pandemic. For many people, it's been a slower life, life on lockdown. It's a more quiet, slow life. And okay, you have many other problems there. I won't go into that now, but for some people, it's been more peaceful than before. So in a way, if we restore a slower pace, we can maybe restore more peace in our heart and peace in our mind. And that kind of lifestyle, a slower lifestyle, will definitely bring down the carbon emission and therefore also help restoring our climate. So one aspect of restoring is to bring back some values and ethics that we might have lost in the way. And for example, it's now a big trend to restore community living. Because when I grew up, it was more common you lived in communities, bigger families. I'm from a small village, they looked after each other. But then you see it became fashionable, everyone has their own flat and everyone lives on their own, which is very carbon costly to live on your own and do everything on your own. But in order to go back to community living, we have to restore relationship with each other, because it takes a lot of personal capacity to live with many different people. And the biggest stress today for most people is relationship. And in order to restore relationship with other people, I also have to restore it with myself. So in a sense, whatever I do, I come back to the notion I have to restore my own peace, my relationship with myself, and I have to restore many of these old values. And once I visited the research, well, actually once a year I visit a research institute in Germany, and I met a scientist there. He's doing research on environment, specifically on water. And I asked him, what is the core value you think we've been forgetting or missing that made us end up in this situation? And he said relationship with nature. So this is also something I can restore, because when I come close to nature, if you think about it, you would actually come close to yourself. Because when we're out in nature, it's kind of the thought pattern changes a bit, and I slow down, and I can maybe touch my dreams, or, you know, my aspirations, my inspirations. You have less tendency to be angry and irritated or violent or whatever when you're in nature. When you have grass under your feet, or you have the blue sky above. So for me, restoration in a sense would be to restore my values, to restore some kind of slower pace of living. And yeah, for example, local shopping. We know today that many of the fruits and vegetables, they get flown all over the world in order to end up in our table. But when we go shopping locally, we also establish a relationship with the shop owner, you see? So it's somehow come back to relationship. So that's one aspect of restoration, at least. Thank you.
And actually, there'll be a session tomorrow on building community and community resilience. So it's nice that you brought that up now, because we can look forward to talking about that more tomorrow.
Very important.
Yeah. So Emma, now you've actually seen some of the first-hand impacts of climate change already. So I'm looking forward to hearing what's your thoughts on this topic of restoring the climate, or even, as we were discussing the other day, even adapting. What does that look like?
Yeah, when I was thinking about this question, firstly, I think the really important and fundamental thing with any climate change solution is to make sure they're being led by local communities and building on traditional and Indigenous knowledge, and doing that hand in hand with science and technology. And I think particularly in countries like Australia and across the Pacific, where there's been colonisation, then we need to really respect that, those traditional values, and really bring those into whatever is happening in terms of solutions. So that's one thought that I've got. Then the other, as I was thinking about this, was more about what we can do or what we can't do in terms of being part of the solution. And one thing I see, particularly in societies that are highly consumerized, like Australia, there's almost, people feel a little bit tricked into thinking that relying only on small individual changes, like using a reusable cup or turning off the lights, is going to be enough to address climate change. But I don't think that's correct. I think small things are obviously very important, but there are really other things that we can do collectively to use the power in our numbers and to make it clear about what we won't accept for our future. And so I've seen really great potential in the power of people, whether that's through participation in the climate change protests. There's a lot of trend and a lot of focus on moving finances into sustainable sources, and if you're fortunate enough to have a super fund, then looking at where your money is invested and moving it into things that are supporting the values that you hold. And also the importance of holding decision makers and organisations and companies that you're engaged with accountable, and spending your money and spending your time with the companies who are part of the solution, not those who are continuing to be part of the problem. So I guess that's my thoughts on how to contribute to solutions and how we can individually contribute to solutions.
No, that's great. Thanks, Emma. And hopefully you know, what we discuss over this whole weekend helps play into that. You know, how do we think beyond just those little actions that we do, but actually how do we fit into a bigger picture with, you know, other communities and organizations. So yeah, hoping we can get further into that as the weekend goes on. So the other part of the conference title is I Am the Solution. So let's explore that next. I'd like to hear from each of you what's working in the space of climate change solutions in your area of work, or what it is that you're involved with within this space. So Emma, would you like to continue on and discuss this next?
Thank you. So in my area of work, where I work with a lot of technical professionals, a lot of engineers, scientists, what I'm starting to see is a real growing understanding of climate change science. And I'm seeing technical professionals really starting to build that into their decision making in a way that hasn't been happening in the past. And this is, I think, driving a lot of change in terms of improved climate change adaptation, and also starting to think about what are the implications of our decisions, whether they be of engineers around building a water pipeline. What is the impact of that in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with it? And there's a growing focus on adapting and mitigating across those professionals that I'm working with. And the other thing that I'm seeing is that there's a real growing number of people who are sharing their thoughts and their insights. And I think together, and this builds on what Sonja was saying around relationships, it's helping everyone to better understand what the issues are and better understand what the solutions are. And together, I think that's helping to drive some really impressive discussions within the industry that I work in. And great to be part of conversations like this with other people who are interested in the issue as well. So thank you.
It's great to have you as part of the conversation too. Heeta, would you be able to share next on what you're seeing as working in the space that you're involved with in terms of I Am the Solution?
Yeah, for me, I think it came across a little organically. So as I got involved in the UNFCCC space, so basically in the international negotiations in 2015. And as I met more young people, as I kept being more and more involved, learning from other people, the biggest glaring fact that kept coming back to me was that, number one, this is a world of itself. Nobody outside of this world, me included, have any idea what goes on. And if you're sort of new into this space, without mentorship or without someone to sort of guide you through, it can take forever, which was the case for me. I had to figure it out, learn the ropes by myself. So it's definitely good to have some sort of mentorship, some sort of guidance if you want to be involved, which is why it's good to be part of like youth constituencies or groups or, you know, delegations where you have people to ask questions to. But outside of that space, barely anybody really understands what's going on. Barely anyone understands the impact of these negotiations or the impact of these documents on their lives. Or what does the Paris Agreement mean? What does it mean for me, you know, as a citizen of India? What does it mean for my country? And does my life have any impact on how the agreement functions? And even general knowledge, like basic knowledge of climate change, just let's forget the whole UNFCCC complications, but basic knowledge of climate change in a country like India is very, very, very low. So young people, and as I was interacting with more and more young people, I saw that there were very few youth from India who were, you know, there internationally, consistently there at every negotiation. We were just two of us. There were a few that came and went on and off, but on a consistent basis, it was mainly just the two, me and another friend of mine. And I just felt, you know, if people within my country, even young people with knowledge, like with academic degrees, probably don't understand a lot more of the process, but very few people understand what exactly climate change is, what they can do as individuals. Forget holding government accountable, forget holding, you know, being part of international spaces, but even as an individual, what can you do? And that knowledge is very low. So this is what motivated me to start taking education, sort of get into climate change education. It started very organically, saying that, you know, young people in India will never be at the international space if they don't have the basic knowledge. And they won't know that they need to engage if you don't know what's going on. So only when you understand the problem can you then think about solutions. If you're oblivious to the problem, you're never going to be part of the solution. Which is what got me into climate change education. It started very organically with a friend of mine, and now it's gotten more systematic into a sort of action-oriented program on what young people, school students can do. And this is the main, at least for me, along with everything else that I do, my heart lies on climate education.
Thanks so much. And yeah, I have to agree, it's so important, the power that knowledge can give, and the way when people learn these things, it can really change the way they live the rest of their lives. So yeah. And then Sonja, would you be able to share what's working in the space of climate change solutions with your involvement with Brahma Kumaris initiative?
Yeah, I will speak as belonging to a faith community. And what has been working really well for us was our investment in renewable energy. And we started actually now, I think 30 years ago, and the pioneer, and especially in India. And now 30 years later, Brahma Kumaris in India is one of the biggest single user institutions of renewable energy. But of course, it's a kind of pioneer working, and that's why the personal stamina takes a lot of, it takes a lot of determination to do it. In the beginning, some people might have said, why do you work with steel and renewable energy? It's better to sit down and meditate. So you kind of meet attitudes like that, but then the group continue and continue and continue. And today, I can see that many other religions or faith communities are also investing in renewable energy in a big scale. And somehow people will not believe you if you don't do something practical also. Because I can speak about attitude change and peace and love and compassion and all of these things, but if it doesn't translate in any form of action for the faith community, people tend not to believe what you say. So the faith communities around the world today are actually helping each other to invest in renewable energy. For us, it's for the meditation centers or for the retreat centers. But then for some churches, for temples and everything, they are going on renewable energy. So that has been very inspiring to see that work happening. And in terms of our faith community, another thing was important was to get our elders on board. You see, because when our wise elders or our daddies or Sister Genti or Daddy Janko, whoever it was of the elder community, when they supported the environment initiative, everyone else got interested. So when we started in Copenhagen, our Sister Jent, who is the leader of Brahma Kumaris in Europe, she said, I'll come for 2 weeks. And some people say, wow, you're going to give 2 weeks of your time to the environment. And they were surprised. And now you see people are starting to understand how important it is that our inside values go all the way out in actions to care for the planet. And one thing which has been important in that journey, especially for the faith community, has been to find the language which inspires our people. You say, because if I contact one country and say I need a green coordinator or environment coordinator in your country, no one really is interested. But if I call and say I need a green angel in your country, everyone is interested. So I find that, to find a language which suits your people, it's very important, and it has to be inspirational, and it has to come from the heart, and then you can move mountains. And I found that the elders in Brahma Kumaris worldwide has been very good in that, because the older community, they had very close relationship with nature in the beginning, meditating a lot outside, things like that, simple living.
seems like there's been a theme running through of, I mean, like you were saying, communicating, learning the community's language of who, you know, who you're driving that change with. And that's tying again with the importance of having that community and relationships. And yeah, so it's nice seeing that, that theme running through. So our next question in the panel, and this will be the last question that I'll ask all of you, is what are some of the most inspirational or the most innovative things that you're seeing happen in climate change initiatives? So does anyone particularly want to go first? Otherwise, I'll put Sonja, I'll put you on the spot, seeing as you've just been speaking. Would you like to share?
Yeah. Well, I will continue a little bit then on the theme of our own faith community. And I will just take a few personal inspirations. But maybe it's 4 or 5 years ago, then suddenly when I was in India, in Rajasthan, on our headquarters, suddenly I could hear environment was the buzzword. It was maybe not talked in the main panel so much, or in the classes, or in the presentations, but what people talked about in the corridors, or over lunch, or over dinner, was about environment and climate change and how I can contribute. And I thought that was so inspirational, because you know what people talk about over tea or coffee or in the corridors, that's what's actually happening in the community. And it might come to the stage or the class level a bit later. And I thought, wow, environment is now the buzzword here. And that was very inspirational. And then, of course, because this is a youth conference, I have to take up Greta Thunberg, and such a big inspiration. And I'm Swedish by birth, actually, so we're from the same country. And in Brahma Kumaris, we often say, when I change, the world changes. And we sometimes say you're never too small to make a difference. Or even if you're one person or a small center, you can make a difference. And I think Greta is a great example of that, because you're 15-year-old in a winter in Stockholm, you're sitting and doing a demonstration on your own. And I don't know how many of us would have continued to do that, a single person in the cold with one homemade poster, right? So that's a great example that you're never too little or never too small to make a difference. So I think that's a big inspiration. And another inspiration is that in the COP conferences, the Interfaith Movement is very big. And when all the different religions go together, and I can see that the environment has a big binding element in it. You see, I talked to a Buddhist friend, and there are so many fractions, so many different kinds of Buddhism, and there are certain things they don't easily agree on, like in any other religion. But in the environment, they were managed, all the different fractions managed to agree on environmental policy and statement. And I can see between the religions, instead of debating the scriptures or the different religious principles, somehow everyone easily agree that the planet is our common home, no matter which religion you belong to. And therefore it takes a common effort to look after it. And somehow in that work, we tend to forget our own strong convictions or commitments, but I forget the self, and I think more of the common home. And that is very inspirational to me.
Thank you for some of the insights there of, you know, these great conversations that go in, even from all these different faith groups. So, yeah. All right, Emma, would you like to share next? What is some of the most inspirational things that you've seen in terms of climate change?
I think one thing that I think is really inspirational and is thinking about how we can redesign how we live so that we can live a more simple life and a life that's more aligned with what the planet needs. And I think you know, hearing discussions happening around this I find to be very inspirational. And I think when we're talking about restoration in terms of the climate, one thing that jumped out to me was thinking, well, as much as we do, and he just said this before, even if we stop all emissions, there is still going to be changes in climate that we need to deal with, that we need to adapt to. So I think there's along with the inspiration and the vision of the future, we also need to be realistic about the changes that we need to adapt to. And we can't avoid the changes from happening, the changes are already happening. But I believe that there are real opportunities to adapt in ways that help build stronger communities, improve our resilience to all kinds of things, whether that might be to pandemics or to natural disasters and to climate change, and make our cities nicer places to be, not only for us, but for future generations as well. So that's what I find really inspiring, is just those conversations about how the future can be and looking to reimagine it.
Thanks so much. And Heeta, would you be able to share what some inspirational things that you've seen that have really stood out for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it has definitely been seeing other young people, to see what they've done, to see their passion, and day after day, you know, that, and as young people, because we're doing this most of the time, it's voluntary. You're doing it because you care and because you like about it. You like it, and it's not something that most of us do as a day job. And I think this is the great bit. So despite your studies, despite whatever work that you're doing, despite everything else, night and day, I've met so many young people who are, you know, juggling 15 things at the same time, but still doing this. And no matter what happens, no matter how each country, how each government reacts, they're back out there the next day, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, they're getting more young people, they're saying the same things and not shying away from speaking the truth, not shying away from calling out polluters or corporations or governments or people. And, you know, just literally, I think this is what also motivates me to go ahead. And, you know, it builds a sort of community, which you don't really find very often. I mean, it's very easy to get burnt out. It's very easy to say, you know, there's no progress being made. It's only getting worse. So I'm not going to do this anymore. It's very easy to give up and say, you know, this is not working. But the fact that there are more and more young people joining this day after day, the youth voice is only growing. And I think this is what inspires me, to see, you know, conversations like this, to see sessions like this over days, you know, happening. People across the age groups coming together for the same cause. And this is inspiring to me.
Thanks so much. And yeah, definitely, I've been feeling so inspired speaking with all of you guys. And it's been an honor to have you all on here. And before we wrap up the panel, Sonja, I was hoping to especially ask you a question just for some tips, because I'm sure everyone here can probably relate when we're looking at climate change action, and even if we are focused on solution, or sometimes it's even just the first steps of knowledge, it can be quite an overwhelming thing. Would you all agree on that? I don't know if you've kind of felt like you've, you know, one person against, you know, all of society. I mean, we hear these wonderful, inspiring stories that all of you have shared, which is great. But, you know, I can definitely say those feelings can sometimes be quite big. So with the work that you've done in the meditation space, would you be able to share maybe just a couple of tips on how we can overcome those feelings and, you know, stay positive while we're working in such a, you know, a big project, I guess? Yeah.
Thank you for asking. Will we do the short meditation? Laurie?
Yes. Did you want to share a couple of tips first?
Yes,
or?
I will.
Yeah.
I will. But because you, Heeta, you also mentioned the burnout that can happen. And we all need to look after ourselves for sure. And one inspirational thing is that in next COP in Glasgow, the UK government is arranging 3 well-being spaces. And so it's become kind of well known that burnout and feeling overwhelmed is one of the hang-ups in our work for climate action. So in the well-being space, there will also be possibility to do some meditation. And we will try that in a little while. But another tip would be to find for yourself what really brings hope and remind yourself from that from time to time. And in COP in Paris, I was sitting with our sister Genti and with 2 others from Brahma Kumaris and the scientist from Sweden, Johan Rockström. And I asked each one of them, what brings you hope? And the scientist, he said that the technology is scalable, gives me hope. And our sister from Brahma Kumaris, she said that the soul is immortal, brings hope. And my 2 other friends, they said that dialogue and conversations brings hope to me. And the other one said that our ability to create thoughts and be creative and to know the power, the impact my thoughts have, that brings hope to me. So I realized at that time the hope factor is very individual. And it's very important for each one of us to know exactly what it is. So I know where I can bring myself if I lose hope or become tired. And also make sure that not to maybe to span over everything in climate action, but find my speciality. And I do that which I can from my heart. And then I have to trust the others to do what I cannot do. And then, of course, for me, meditation is a way to keep well-being and balance. And we will do a short meditation now for the environment. It's called Being Connected.
All right, so while our tech team gets ready to share that, maybe Heeta and Emma, if you'd like to just share. I just thought it was so beautiful that you're sharing, to think of something that we draw hope from. So if you've got something that you're thinking of right now, maybe you can just briefly share it while our tech team gets ready to share that. Putting you on the spot.
No, just quickly, I mean, just to sort of complement what Sonja just said about well-being and how we do need to look after our mental health. And this is extremely, extremely true. Which is why also at the KOI we have a space, a well-being space for young people to meditate, to pray, to do what you want. Some of them just want a nap, but that's fine. They don't. I mean, it's a space for you to do what you want silently. Just be there by yourself, and sort of just recover from the craziness, from all the stress of conferences. And at the same time, even when, of course, conferences are maddening, and when you're there, you do. An additional space is what you need, but I think all of us need to sort of take time, just breathe, and sort of think about what we're doing, where we're going, but also just think about, just be with ourselves and sort of cut off from all the other things. And I think this is very, very important, even for me on a personal level. And I'm saying this from experience, where of late I've just been juggling so many things that last night I had this whole overwhelming, anxiety attack, and I had a breakdown because I just couldn't keep up with everything that was going on. And this is when, and I don't want everyone else to reach this stage to say, okay, I need a break. You might as well take a break just before you reach this sort of, space where it's getting too much for you. And no wonder how often I say this, it's a lot more harder to put it into practice. But I try. And this is what we all have to keep doing, because if we are not, we're in this for the long run. So if we're not okay, it's not going to help the movement, the cause in the longer run anyways.
That's so true. And so hopefully we'll have minutes of meditation next, but for everyone else to help disconnect. But first, Emma, if you had a thought on hope, if you'd like to share.
Thank you. I really love what Sonja and Heeta had said about yeah, looking after your own well-being and that being important. One thing I find brings me a lot of hope is music. And when I was spending time in Kiribati, I was so drawn to the music there and the sense of fun. And it almost feels like the people there and the culture has built this resilience of finding great fun and you know, sharing wonderful times together through music and through dance. And it provides sort of a counterpoint to the challenging experiences that people have. And so I reflect on that, and I think that brings me a lot of hope. So yeah, thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. All right, so sit back and relax, and we'll just have a couple minutes of meditation now.
In my mind, I go to a place in nature, a place of greenery and peace. In my thoughts, I emerge the wind, and I can hear the leaves of the tree moving in the breeze. The wind whispers secrets in my ear, and I understand. I can feel the sunshine on my face, softly warming my heart and soul. The birds are chirping in the background and singing songs of happiness and joy. I emerge the feeling of belonging to the planet, to nature, to the animals and all living beings. I feel safe in being forever connected to this global family of all living beings, and being connected to the world around me. I will remember this moment if I ever lose hope for our common future of harmony for all.
So I hope you enjoyed that. There's a few minutes of silence, and also to send out those good thoughts to the world. Next, we have a couple of breakout rooms, or one breakout room. We'll be discussing a couple of questions in this breakout room. So for those who haven't been into a breakout room in Zoom before, it's quite easy. Our tech team will put you into a different room, and all you need to do is click the join button that appears. It's quite simple. And so in these rooms, you'll be with a smaller group of people, and you'll be able to discuss a couple of questions. So when you join these groups, we'll just bring up some instructions so you can see this as well. But when you join these groups, I'll ask you to first introduce yourselves, say your name, where you're joining from, And then secondly, assign one person from your group as the group representative, and they'll very, very briefly, just in say 20 seconds when we all come back, just give a quick update on what were some of those key themes or points that you guys discussed. So first of all, introduce yourselves. Secondly, find that group representation to do a brief summary when we come back. And as we get close to the end of the time, you'll see a reminder appearing at the top of the screen. Unfortunately, we're running a little bit short, so instead of 13 minutes, you have 10 minutes once we go into these breakout rooms. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Yep, 10 minutes to discuss a couple of questions, introduce yourselves, and find a representation to the summary. All right, so the questions, if you're ready, I suggest you get out your camera and take a quick photo of these questions. So there's two questions. The first question is, what does restoring the climate, I am the solution, mean to you? The second question is, what is something you personally do for climate change or for the environment? You know, it could be something that you show, you know, that shows that you care, or maybe you're involved with something or other, if you'd like to share that with each other. So first question, what does restoring the climate, I am the solution, mean to you? Second question, what is something you personally do for climate change or for the environment? Okay, so hopefully you have these questions now noted down. Our tech teams will start the breakout rooms, and all you need to do is click join. All right, see you in 10 minutes.
Thank you, everybody, for that panel discussion. To all our speakers, that was great. And then we did get into our breakout rooms. I have a small summary here. What we talked about was an engineer who gave air pollution as one of the solutions, looking at the solar industry as another solution. They're bringing biochips productions. And again, using these technologies as another solution to climate change. We also had the spiritual, or say the inside work, that we also discussed in the panel discussion. So being one with nature, you realize the beauty of that and then give these beautiful vibrations to the elements. So not just wait for something like a bushfire or something on those lines, but give these elements the vibrations. So again, in the group that we had the opportunity of having kind of different kind of thoughts coming from Bangladesh, India, Denmark, because we had a panel member in the group, and of course, Australia. So that was for my breakout room. I was hoping that we have people who can raise their hands and give us some more inputs at what happened in their breakout room.
Hi, I'm Kia. So I was in breakout room 4, and we were discussing, so for the first question, in terms of restoring the climate, I am the solution, and what does that mean to us? We all sort of agreed that it can feel really overwhelming if you just think of yourself as an individual, and not feeling like you'll have much of an impact because it's such a big problem. And so we discussed the importance of connecting with others and educating yourself and having conversations with others, even something as small as a conversation with someone else can plant a seed in them, and that starts to create ripples. So that was what we talked about with, in terms of I am the solution. It's sort of educating ourselves and connecting with others to have more of an impact and not feel so overwhelmed. And then in terms of some of the things that we listed that we're personally doing for the climate, so we talked about things like composting food scraps, reducing plastic, reducing waste, reducing consumption, And then a really big one that we all focused on was we're all trying to do our best to consume more knowledge and educate ourselves, because that's only going to help in terms of knowing where then we can take action, and having a better understanding of the problem is obviously going to lead to a better solution. And then things like focusing on some key areas, so like planting trees, calling out organisations that aren't doing the right thing, aren't doing enough, climate strike organising, and just living in a more conscious way ourselves and with our family, and doing what we can to have a bit of an impact.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kia. Perfect. Do we have another person?
I may have forgotten to explain, there's a reactions button down on the bottom, and if you click that, then you can raise your hand there. Sorry, I forgot to mention that in the housekeeping.
Oh, good. All right. Who do we have?
Hi, I'm Do here. I'm from Breakout Room 1, and I want to summarize the Breakout Room 1's discussion. And about the restoring the climate change, the solution is talking about based on our fields. Like I'm from applied meteorology, that I use the data climate to learn about paleoclimate and so on, and it will the solution for understanding people that don't know what happened in our earth. And about the one question, and the second question is relate because what from your personality can do more to combat the climate change, and we talking about the climate education, and the climate education can collaborate with other people. It's based on condition in each country. I think that's all. Thank you.
Beautiful. So we've got that coming out. Thank you so much, Dohir. And where are you from, Dohir, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm from Indonesia.
Indonesia, beautiful. So that's what we are getting here, these flavors from all these different countries, and it is coming out very strongly that educating ourselves and others in terms of climate change is something which is everybody's feeling. So that's beautiful. Do we have any other questions? Sorry, any other summaries from their groups? Okay, so we can now move in for a short 10-minute session with questions. So I'm just going to check if there are any questions on the chat board at the moment, but we would like to get some questions which we can address to the panel, and y'all can get them answered if y'all haven't got them answered already. So yeah, can we get one question?
Hello, Ali.
Yes.
Actually, for me, just was that to share a feedback that came from one of the group, which will be nice to know. And that is that it's from the Rain Bellow. I think they were in one of the group, and they said that, you know, to know more about the climate crisis and environment is very vital step for them, so that we can contribute to the movement. And also they acknowledge that, you know, there can be only a significant process what we have to achieve, especially if we do it collectively, so individually as well and collectively. So this is what I would like to share from one of the feedback that came from one of the group.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Falak. That was great. Okay, so I just had wanting to know if there are any questions, anything that you would like to ask the panelists. We will not get this opportunity before. Okay, Dohir, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, before the panelists have perspective about the solution to restoring the climate. But I'm new in here. I just joined the YOUNGO maybe 5 months ago, and I just know about the physical basis to combat the climate change. But after I joined the YOUNGO, it's not at all about the physical basis, but gender and agriculture, and also all of the fields is important to combat the climate change. But I want to know, what do you think about the whenever the disaster is occur, what is the important fields that to I think adaptation of mitigation before the disaster and after the disaster?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
Okay, the last part is what is the important field that have more impact for before the disaster is occur, or after the disaster is occur. So I think that it's different. Education is before the disaster, I mean, I think, but after the disaster is gender more powerful to combat the climate, I think. What do you think to all the panelists?
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tohir, for your question. Any of the panelists want to go in for the question? Basically, it is, what can we do before the disaster and before after the disaster in terms of, I think, the education that we can have. So I think we have only one panelist who can take this question on. Emma?
I can speak, but Sonja looked like maybe you wanted to say something.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I guess I'm just thinking about the disaster that hit Australia late in 2019, where we had a lot of bushfires, which was incredibly devastating. One thing that has come as a result of that, I think, is a growing understanding of the urgency of climate change. And I think, as terrible as it is that we have disasters occurring, in terms of timing, when people are engaged and understand and see the visualization of what can occur, it can be a good time to rally some movements at that stage in a sensitive way, recognizing people have obviously had a lot of loss, but you know, trying to prevent that from happening again and using that as motivation for people to take some genuine action.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'll just shortly say, from a spiritual viewpoint, now we'll hear Charlie here soon. I'm sure he has something he can say to that. But before any disaster, I need to be very stable inside. And I also need to increase my capacity to help others. And in a sense, it is the same afterwards, isn't it? I need to be stable, and I also need to increase my capacity to help others. And I was in the lockdown in India when it happened first in March, and I realized the very old truth that you will follow a leader who is peaceful. Because we were in a situation no one had tried, and some people got upset and some didn't, and some people talk east and west because no one ever tried it before. And without knowing, I listened to those who were peaceful. So wherever I can do, if I can remain peaceful, then I can be a good example for others. But that will take practice. Of course, it will take a lot of practice, and we don't practice in chaotic times.
Beautiful. I guess that's the key point. Be ready before we have the disaster or anything to that matter. We get ready for whatever would be coming our way. Thank you so much for that, Sonja. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Heeta, for also being a part of this great panel that we have. Keeping in mind of the time, I will be moving to a message from Charlie, Charlie Hogg. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Charlie Hogg. He is the director of the Brahma Kumaris and the CEO and the board member of the Brahma Kumaris. He started out as a 23-year-old hippie turned happy yogi. He has now 40 years of meditation experience. He's been to 120 countries on different kinds of tours, doing very different kind of sessions on meditation and a huge number of topics. And he's renowned for his laughter and also his joyful nature. And without further ado, I hand you over to young Charlie Hogg. Over to you, Charlie.
So thank you so much, Ali. It's extremely lovely to be with everybody. And I have been listening to the panel, and I really thank Sonja and Emma and Heeta. It was quite lovely to listen to you and also the feedback from the groups. I think when I heard about this event, I was quite touched by the theme that I am the solution, because I think for me that says absolutely everything. And actually last year I was in New York. I went to a retreat in upstate New York, which was an incredible collection of people, quite influential people, a lot from Wall Street and so on. And, you know, there was a lot of meditation and discussion, and it came up that, you know, when we have these little gatherings like we are, you know, online now, there's about 30 of us. It's very engaging and we're connected with each other with similar ideas. But it seems like a drop in the ocean, a tiny drop. And occasionally we feel a bit hopeless. We feel, can we really make a difference? But I found it quite empowering, because all of these people were saying that what is happening on the planet at the moment, all over the planet, these little groups are organically mushrooming in every country, in every society, in every city, in every different strata of our communities, people who want change. And I would say the heart of it is that people who see what we see out there in the world is a result of what's happening up here. And you know, sometimes when I see our world, I find it an absolute wonder. 7.8 billion human beings, 195 countries, 6,500 spoken languages, 4,500 practice religions, nearly 2 billion websites. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? But that's the seen world. That's the world we touch and feel and see through our eyes. But there's another world, the unseen world. And this is the world of human minds. And you know, science tells us that this mind can generate 70,000 unique thought patterns in a waking day. And you know, my image for the planet today is like we're living in this thought soup. We're all sort of 7.8 billion people thinking and spreading our thought energy. That is an environment. And you know what I feel? What we're seeing is our climate being destroyed in front of our eyes day by day. And unfortunately, it's increasing. But what is feeding it? What is feeding this? To me, it's the collective human mind. And when the collective human mind is full of greed, we have this incredibly materialistic culture that is destroying our physical world around us. When the collective human mind is full of ego, I'm just full of self-interest. I'm only interested in me and my family, and I don't really care what's happening outside of that. And I really feel that when we take responsibility for my mind, I feel this is the seed of the issue, that when really I am the solution in the way I think. Because sometimes we don't like the result in the world out there, but my inner world is also contributing. My own desires are contributing to the culture we see around us. And that's why the solutions of action, which we've been talking about, is so important. But the solution of consciousness and my responsibility to be a part of the change in the way I begin to think and really shifting a lot of my thinking. And, you know, I had a huge aha moment in my life. When I was only 17, I went to a university festival in Canberra. And it was the time of the Cold War, Russia and America. It was a huge issue like climate is now. And I went on a demonstration against, you know, the war in Vietnam, which was happening at the moment. Australia was involved. And the students got all excited. One thing led to another. I was arrested and put in the federal prison with 200 other young people. And we spent the night singing songs. But when it actually finished, a very deep conversation developed about, you know, what's really happening in our planet. And, you know, we were the leaders of the peace movement in this country. And I realized we were such an angry, negative, and aggressive group of people. And it dawned on me so deeply at that moment that unless we really shift our thinking, I don't see that down the track, when our consciousness, that world, meets the material world, we won't see much change. The real change really has to begin here. And I had such a deep aha moment at that time. And so I really, I love what you're doing. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I really genuinely feel, without, you know, sounding, hope I don't sound patronizing, but really, I think it's young people who are holding this agenda in the world today. And it's young people who are driving the change which is really required. And I really feel, even though we're only 30, what is happening is these local, you know, groups, these local conferences are really having an influence all over the planet. They are mushrooming, and they will mushroom into a movement. So I'd really like to thank you from my heart for coming together, giving your time, and especially would love to thank the team that's organized this, because I know how busy they are. Ananya and the whole team, absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate the youth team, the environment team from the Brahma Kumaris. I know how much they work on themselves, and they also work so hard to make this world a better place. So that's really all I've got to say, which I'm probably sure you're happy to hear. But really loved hearing what you're doing, and thank you so much for your contribution to this incredibly important work of climate change. And if I can just say, lovely to see Sonja too, who's come on board from Denmark, and she's an incredible pioneer in the Brahma Kumaris worldwide. She's quite phenomenal how much energy she's put in for 20 years, Sonja? Must be close to 20 years. Fantastic, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Charlie, and for your thoughts, and to all of our other panelists. It's been absolutely fantastic hearing from all of you. I've thoroughly enjoyed these conversations, and I found they've gone far too fast for what I would have liked. I know there's a few questions in the chat box which we would have loved to answer, but I guess if anyone reads them and has their own thoughts, if you can answer these questions, please feel free to do so while I wrap up. But some things that particularly stood out for me today was these themes of you know, honing into your community, digging into the knowledge, and having that knowledge first before we can really bounce into those solutions. And sometimes it is about slowing down and taking, you know, going back to how things were more originally, at a slower pace, which has been a great thing to do with the pandemic when we've all gone into lockdown. Tomorrow we can look forward to a lot more conversations across a few different topics. We've got some fantastic speakers lined up. So for example, we've got Dr. Michelle Maloney, Charlie Trindle, Brenna Quinlan, Nafisa, Anthony Hill, Tamison Ramsey, Joe Ludbrook, and Sita Bickwith. And we'll be exploring a range of topics relating to climate change solutions, and perhaps some even that you may not have come across before or thought of. For example, art as activism. Oh, you've got the pictures there in case you wanted a reference of the speakers. And then for the topics, we've got art as activism, the rights of the land, and our relationships with the planet. So please join us tomorrow from 9:20, that's in Sydney or Melbourne time zone, for a 9:30 a.m. start. We'll have a morning session followed by an evening session. You can find in your emails today, there's a full schedule of the entire program for your reference. And just a reminder, as I mentioned at the beginning, the input from these conversations, it's going to go into that outcomes report, which then goes to the Conference of Youth. So if there were things that you would particularly like to share that related to what was discussed today, you know, what stood out to you, what really made an impact to you, go back to that email that we sent through this morning. There's that link towards the bottom of it where you can share those thoughts or reflections, and we'll take that and put that into that report. So thanks all for your participation. Thanks again to our awesome panelists for joining us, from whether it's here in Australia or all across the world. And thank you all for your participation. We have another answer in the chat box, so before we close off, feel free to have a click on that and have a look. But on this note, I'd like to say good night and looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.